BTS news today, the lights of Seoul never truly sleep. They shimmer against the Han River, reflecting fragments of stories whispered and never told. The kind that live between the lines of lyrics and the silence between two voices on stage. For years, fans have watched, wondered, and held their breath whenever Jungkook and Jimin shared the same frame. To the casual eye, it's friendship. To others, it's artistry. But to those who've watched closely, the story of Jakook, that quiet, unspoken thread, feels like something deeper, something that neither words nor cameras could quite capture. The truth about Jakook has never been a loud one. It was built in glances across rehearsal rooms, in late-night laughter caught on V-Lives, in the subtle way Jungkook's hand would linger behind Jimin's back as crowds roared. And yet, in the whirlwind world of BTS, where every gesture is dissected, every emotion magnified, silence often speaks the loudest. No one knows exactly when it began. Some trace it back to the earliest years, when Jungkook was still a teenager trying to find his place, and Jimin, barely older, carried himself with the quiet determination of someone who wanted to protect. They balanced each other, said one anonymous staff member who had seen the boys during their trainee days. Jungkook was pure energy, a storm. Jimin was calm water. But when they met, something shifted, they both changed. Through the years, their chemistry on stage became impossible to ignore. From the 2016 Mama performance to live rehearsals, from We Don't Talk Anymore covers to the whispered interactions behind the cameras, fans began collecting fragments like puzzle pieces. Not for scandal, but for meaning. Because in BTS, where every relationship is like family, Jakook carried an energy that defied easy labels. That it wasn't always easy. The more people talked, the more the silence around them grew. Jungkook, who had always been open yet fiercely private, started speaking less when the topic veered close to Jimin. Jimin, who always wore his heart on his sleeve, began guarding it carefully in public. They know what people say, another insider once noted. They just don't feed it. They understand each other without needing to explain anything. In 2023, when Jungkook released his solo album Golden, fans noticed Jimin's absence from public celebrations. But eagle-eyed followers found tiny clues. The way Jungkook mentioned, "someone who helped me feel confident again," or the familiar tone of voice in an unreleased demo. Then, weeks later, Jimin appeared quietly on Jungkook's livestream, not saying much, only laughing softly. The silence between them said more than any interview could. Sources close to Big Hit have long insisted that BTS members maintain deep bonds built on years of shared hardship, not hidden romance. Yet, the emotional intensity between Jungkook and Jimin transcends the boundaries of simple friendship. Or perhaps it redefines it. "Sometimes you find someone who just sees you," said an unnamed producer who once worked with both idols. "You don't need to explain who you are, they already know. That's what I see in them." The unspoken connection of Jakook isn't about labels, it's about timing. The way two lives evolve in sync even when separated by fame, schedules, or silence. When Jungkook went live from his dark Seoul apartment one rainy night, fans noticed how his playlist suddenly shifted from upbeat pop to something softer. A piano instrumental reminiscent of Jimin's solo style. "Music says what I can't," Jungkook murmured that night, before the screen faded to black. Later, Jimin was seen leaving HYB late at night, holding what appeared to be a lyric notebook. The word "you" was circled multiple times. Dispatch photographers tried to follow, but he disappeared into the dark. It wasn't proof of anything, but it was enough to reignite the mystery, that strange, enduring energy between them. The emotional thread deepened during BTS's military hiatus. Letters from the members revealed fragments of longing and gratitude. Jungkook wrote about missing the sound of laughter that makes me feel at ease. Jimin's letter, days later, mentioned someone who reminds me to smile even when I'm quiet. Fans didn't need names. The connection was already clear. As the group prepared for reunion in 2025, anticipation reached a fever pitch. Every post, every look, every accidental moment became a story. And then, during a behind-the-scenes clip from a secret studio session, ARMY noticed something small but piercing. Jungkook and Jimin's eyes met across the room, and both smiled before turning away. The clip lasted 2 seconds, But the world paused. One Korean journalist described it best. You can't fake that kind of comfort. Theirs is not a show. It's memory, the kind that lingers. For Jikook, who has grown into a global star with unshakable composure, Jimin remains one of the few who can disarm him with a glance. And for Jimin, who carries emotions like their melodies, Jikook remains the grounding note beneath the song. When asked once about his bond with the members, Jikook hesitated before answering. "They are all part of who I am," he said. "But there are moments when someone just understands you. That's not something you can plan." The internet exploded with theories. Was he referring to Jimin? Was that the quiet acknowledgement fans had waited years to hear? Or was it simply another layer in the ever-mysterious fabric of BTS's brotherhood? Dispatch attempted to clarify the rumors, but the responses from HYB remained unchanged. No comment. That silence, again, became part of the myth. What makes Jakook so emotionally magnetic isn't evidence, it's essence. The way the universe seems to bend slightly when they share the same stage. The way laughter spills naturally between them even when words don't. The truth, perhaps, isn't about romance or secrecy. It's about human connection in its purest, most unspoken form. In a world where everything is recorded, tweeted, dissected, and sold, Jakook's silence feels sacred. They've built a space where understanding replaces explanation, a quiet sanctuary inside chaos. It's not about who they are to each other, but what they bring out in one another. Courage, creativity, gentleness. Even so, there were moments of distance that fans couldn't ignore. During one Weverse Live, when Jungkook seemed unusually withdrawn, he played a song, Promise by Jimin. He didn't say why. He only smiled faintly, eyes soft, and said, "It's been a while." The comments section filled with teary messages, and for a moment, the entire fandom seemed to breathe in unison. Weeks later, Jimin uploaded a late-night Instagram story, a skyline, moonlit, with a caption that read simply, "Some promises never fade." Coincidence or not, the synchronicity felt too sharp to ignore. Behind all the speculation lies something fragile, a shared truth that may never be spoken aloud. Every artist hides a story in their art. Maybe this one lives in the pauses, in the way Jimin's choreography sometimes mirrors Jungkook's intensity, or in the way Jungkook's voice softens whenever he says Jimin's name. Insiders whisper that when the two rehearse together, the room feels different. Not louder, but warmer. "You can sense it," said a stage coordinator who once assisted during a dance run-through. "They move like they already know what the other will do. It's not planned, it's instinct." That instinct, that unspoken rhythm, is what the world has come to call Jikook. Not as a ship, not as a label, but as an unexplainable phenomenon. Two souls aligned in time. When BTS returns to the stage as a complete group after military service, fans expect fireworks, new music, and shared tears. But somewhere among the thousands of lights, there will likely be a moment, just one, where Jungkook and Jimin find each other again through the noise. And the cameras will catch it, even if words never do, because the truth about Jakook is not a secret to be exposed. It's a story to be felt. It's about how one glance can hold years of history, how two voices can harmonize not only in pitch, but in emotion. It's about understanding without needing permission to speak. Perhaps that's why they've never confirmed or denied anything. Perhaps the silence isn't avoidance, it's preservation. Some connections are too delicate for definition. As the night deepens over Seoul, and the last train hums past the river, the city glows with quiet anticipation. Somewhere out there, maybe Jungkook is writing again, another lyric about warmth, distance, and belonging. Maybe Jimin, miles away, is sketching choreography to the same rhythm without even realizing it. And maybe, just maybe, that's the real revelation. That even without words, without explanations, the connection between them continues to breathe, softly, steadily, beautifully, in the spaces between sound. Because love, in its truest form, doesn't always need to be said. Sometimes it only needs to be understood. The night that broke the silence began like any other, Seoul's winter air sharp and alive with the hum of streetlights. Jungkook had just returned from a late-night studio session, hood up, mask covering most of his face, camera flashes reflecting in his tired eyes. He didn't say a word to the reporters waiting outside HYB. But those who saw him swore there was something different in the way he moved, like he was carrying something heavy that wasn't physical at all. A few hours later, Jimin posted on Weverse. Just one sentence. Some truths don't need to be spoken to be real. The comments section erupted. Theories spread like wildfire. Fans began connecting dots that were never meant to be joined. Jungkook's silence, Jimin's post, the long nights of music creation that never reached the public. But beneath all the speculation, there was something deeper, a quiet ache, an understanding that maybe some connections in life aren't meant to be explained, only felt. Dispatch, always the watcher from the shadows, released an article days later with photographs that blurred the line between truth and rumor. The headline was simple: two shadows leaving HYB. Is friendship enough to explain this warmth? The photos showed Jimin and Jungkook in the parking lot after midnight, both wearing black caps, their steps in sync. Nothing scandalous, nothing overt, just two figures walking side by side. But the atmosphere between them felt alive, electric in its simplicity. Those close to them rarely speak publicly, but one staff member, identified only as K, described the moment quietly to the press. They have their own language, not in words, but in presence. You feel it when they're together. It's something that doesn't fade, even after time apart. And maybe that's why the world has never stopped watching them. Because Jikook is not about drama or gossip. It's about connection in its purest form, something rare in the glittering, chaotic world of global fame. There was one moment during BTS's Proof era that perfectly captured it. Behind the scenes, during a break from shooting, the members sat laughing and chatting, the camera crew adjusting lights. Jungkook sat quietly in a corner, humming a melody under his breath. Jimin walked over, leaned slightly, and without a word began harmonizing with him. Perfectly, instinctively. The sound that emerged wasn't planned, wasn't rehearsed. It was effortless, like the universe had simply aligned for a second to let them exist in the same frequency. The staff froze. Someone later described it as the kind of sound that makes you believe in destiny. Fans later noticed that the melody was almost identical to a small instrumental piece Jungkook played during his solo live months later, a track he titled Unspoken. Coincidence? Maybe. But to those who have followed their story for years, it felt like a message, a reminder that even silence can have a melody. As months passed, both Jungkook and Jimin began exploring their own worlds more boldly. Jimin released Face, an album raw with emotion and self-reflection. Jungkook launched Golden, a celebration of light and independence. Yet, even as they stood separately in their creative journeys, there was always an invisible thread. During one interview, when Jungkook was asked about who had inspired his solo process, he paused. "There's someone who reminds me why music feels honest again," he said softly. That's enough. Fans didn't need confirmation. They knew. But perhaps the most haunting chapter in their unspoken connection came during the early military days. With no performances, no cameras, and no daily chaos, both men vanished into silence. For nearly 6 months, there were no updates. No posts, no sightings. Until one cold December night, a soldier stationed in Gangwon province posted anonymously on social media, describing a small Christmas event inside the camp. Two voices sang quietly together. The soldier wrote. One was soft and emotional, the other steady and strong. You could feel they weren't performing. They were remembering. He didn't name them. He didn't have to. Weeks later, an unverified recording began circulating online. Faint, distant, but recognizable. The song? Christmas Day. The same duet Jungkook and Jimin performed years ago, before the world turned their friendship into mythology. It was almost poetic. Two voices reunited, not for the world this time, but for themselves. That was the moment fans realized the truth. Jakook was never about what could be seen. It was about what continued unseen. When BTS finally regrouped in late 2025 for their much-anticipated reunion project, speculation was at its peak. Every headline screamed for answers. Will Jimin and Jungkook address the years of silence? Will they finally speak about the bond fans never stopped believing in? But during the group's first press appearance together, something unexpected happened. It wasn't words. It was a look. Jimin, standing to Jungkook's left, laughed at something RM said, and Jungkook, almost unconsciously, turned to look at him. the kind of look that holds entire histories in it. He didn't smile, not fully, but his expression softened in that familiar way that fans had seen since 2015. It was the kind of gaze you give someone who feels like home. And that's when everyone understood there would never be a statement, never a revelation in the way the tabloids wanted. The truth about Jakook was already revealed, not in interviews or posts, but in the quiet moments when their souls seemed to recognize each other. Later, during the concert rehearsals, one staff member described an intimate moment away from the cameras. Jimin had been practicing his solo choreography over and over, she said. He looked exhausted. Jungkook walked in, didn't say anything, just handed him a water bottle. Then he stayed, watching until Jimin finished, clapping once. It was simple, but Jimin smiled in a way that said everything. Sometimes love, in its purest form, doesn't need language. It exists in gestures, in glances, in the air that passes between two people who've lived too much together to ever really be apart. When the Proof 2.0 documentary finally aired, one clip quietly broke the internet. Jungkook and Jimin were sitting side by side during the editing session for a group performance. The director asked who should decide the final version. Jungkook pointed at Jimin. "He knows what feels right," he said. Jimin looked surprised, then laughed softly and whispered, "I'll trust your ear more than mine." Those few seconds, that exchange of trust, humility, and warmth, spoke volumes. In a group where perfection is everything, the simple act of trusting each other became revolutionary. Years of speculation, years of silence, all leading to one simple truth. Jakook's connection doesn't need to be proven. It only needs to be felt. And maybe that's the hardest part for the world to accept, that something real doesn't always crave an audience. Tonight, as the city breathes quietly beneath the Seoul skyline, one can't help but wonder if Jungkook is still awake somewhere, strumming his guitar, while Jimin hums quietly in another room, somewhere miles away but close in spirit. Maybe the same moonlight touches both of them. Maybe that's enough, because the truth about Jakook was never meant to be spoken, it was meant to be lived. The show began with chaos, thunderous music, the fireworks, the screams. RM's voice filled the air with power. Taeyong's smile broke hearts like sunlight. Jin's warmth spread through every word. But when the camera cut to Jungkook for the first time, hair tousled, eyes glowing, microphone trembling slightly in his hand, a silence seemed to ripple through the arena. Because standing just a few meters away, framed by soft light and mist, was Jimin, he wasn't smiling at first. Neither of them were. They were both still, their bodies moving with the rhythm, but their eyes locked in something quieter than the music, something that looked like recognition after years apart. The song playing was For Youth, but as their voices blended, something else seemed to live inside it, a melody that belonged only to them. The performance went on, but fans could feel it. The shift. Every time Jungkook's voice soared, Jimin's harmony followed. Every time Jimin stepped forward, Jungkook instinctively mirrored him. It wasn't choreography, it was instinct. The kind of connection that doesn't fade with time. It deepens at one point. During a break between songs, Jimin turned slightly, his microphone still against his lips, and said softly, "We've waited a long time for this, haven't we?" The crowd screamed, but his eyes were not on the audience. They were on Jungkook. Jungkook nodded, barely, subtly, but enough for cameras to catch it. And for the first time that night, he smiled. It wasn't the practiced, public smile of a superstar. It was small, quiet, real, the kind of smile you give someone who's been with you through storms no one else saw. After the concert, Dispatch would write that it was a look that could only come from shared history. Korean media called it a reunion of hearts. But for those who were there, it felt like something beyond words, as if the years of silence, the rumors, the endless questions had all dissolved into that single exchange of glances. Halfway through the concert, the lights dimmed. The next segment was unannounced, labeled only as surprise stage. The screen went black, and a soft piano began to play. The audience gasped. The melody was unmistakable. We Don't Talk Anymore. The 2017 song that had once made the world fall in love with their harmony was returning. But this time, it sounded different, slower, gentler, more intimate. The arrangement carried a sadness that hadn't been there before, as though both men had lived 1,000 lifetimes since the last time they sang it together. Then, a single spotlight rose. Jimin stepped forward, eyes closed, whispering the first verse in that breathless tone that makes silence ache. His voice trembled, but it wasn't weakness, it was emotion. And then, almost like a response to an invisible cue, Jakook joined in. The harmony was seamless, haunting, devastatingly beautiful. The crowd didn't scream. They cried, because in that song, everyone could feel it. The years of unsent messages, the memories, the laughter they once shared when they were just two young men trying to figure out how to survive the world. The pain of distance, the peace of understanding. When the final note faded, neither of them moved. They stood there, looking at each other under the falling lights. Jimin's lips parted, like he wanted to speak, but instead, he only mouthed something, one word. Fans tried to read it later through high-definition recordings, but the only thing certain was the tenderness in Jungkook's eyes when he nodded in return. But it was like watching two constellations find each other again after years of drifting apart. Later, backstage footage would show them sitting quietly side by side in the dressing room. No cameras, no stage makeup, just two souls resting. Jungkook had his head slightly tilted, humming something soft, and Jimin was beside him, tapping rhythm on his knee. The staff didn't interrupt. One of them later confessed. It felt sacred, like watching peace itself. And then came the ending. The moment that would be replayed endlessly online. Dissected frame by frame as BTS gathered for their final bow. Jungkook reached for Jimin's hand. He didn't hesitate. He didn't look around to see who was watching. He just took it. Jimin looked down for a second, surprised, emotional, and then squeezed back. The cameras caught the tears in his eyes. That it was small. It was simple, but it was everything. After the concert, social media exploded. Hashtags like hashtag Jikook reunion, hashtag unspoken connection, and hashtag we don't talk anymore 2025 trended globally for 3 straight days. Fans wrote essays, poems, songs. Artists painted the moment. The world had seen countless performances, but this one felt different, not because it was loud, but because it was human. And yet, neither of them spoke about it afterward. No interview, no clarification. When a reporter asked Jimin about the duet at a later press conference, he only smiled faintly and said, "Some songs are never just songs." Jungkook, in his next Weverse Live, was asked directly by fans about the performance. He laughed softly, shook his head, and replied, "It was real. That's all." Those 4 words set the world ablaze again, not because they revealed anything new, but because they confirmed what fans had always felt. The truth about Jakook was not hidden. It was right there, in front of everyone, unspoken but undeniable. Days after the concert, a behind-the-scenes clip surfaced on HYBE's official channel. It showed Jungkook entering the studio alone, late at night. He sat down, adjusted the mic, and began recording something softly, just his voice and a guitar. The lyrics were simple. "We don't need to say a word. The silence knows our names. You are where I end and start. Unspoken, but never the same." The file name on the screen read Jim_2025. No one knows if it was meant for release. Maybe it never will be. But for those who heard it, it felt like closure, or maybe continuation. Months later, during Jimin's solo fan meeting, a fan asked if he had a favorite memory from the concert. He smiled, his voice soft. "There was a moment when I didn't have to sing," he said, "because someone else already knew the words. And that was it. The final revelation. Because the truth about Jakook was never about confirming or denying. It was never about what the world demanded. It was about two people finding each other again and again, across time, distance, and silence, and realizing that connection doesn't need language to survive. They are two verses of the same song, two brushstrokes of the same painting, two stars in the same constellation, different, yet eternally connected. In the years to come, their bond will still be analyzed, questioned, romanticized. But for those who were there that night in Busan, for those who watched the lights fall and the unspoken glances unfold, the truth is already clear. Jakook is not a rumor. It's a rhythm. It's the sound between heartbeats. It's the quiet revelation that sometimes the most powerful connections are the ones the world will never fully understand. And somewhere tonight, as the world sleeps and the city hums, Maybe Jimin is still humming that song under his breath. Maybe Jungkook is strumming the same chords miles away. And maybe, between them, across the silence, across the distance, the unspoken